2.5 podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. And today we got Juan from Tourism AI Network here with me. We thought we'd have an episode where we can kind of talk about sort of the general state of the generative AI, where things are at. For context, in the past few weeks, there's been a whole bunch of new models released, a whole bunch of new tools released. Google did their annual I/O conference. So there's just been a lot of sort of news about different things happening in the AI space. So we thought we'd take this opportunity to talk about kind of what's new, how we see the world progressing, and what you need to be sort of thinking about in your organizations to leverage where things are going. So that's my little setup. So why don't we talk first, Juan, about Google I/O, because just for context for everybody, Google I/O is an annual conference that Google puts on, generally focused on developers. So it's generally where the sort of the developer community goes to find out everything that's new in the Google environment. So often in the I/O conference, they talk about, updates to Google Ads and all kinds of other things. And this year's I/O conference was all AI all the time. I think there was over 100 announcements of different products and models and updates to technology and all kinds of things. And literally AI was essentially in every single one of those one way or another in terms of different features, different tools. So Juan, why don't we kind of start off with that, and maybe why don't we give a bit of an overview of some of the big things that you heard from the Google I/O conference that you think is going to be impactful for people going forward.
Well, yeah. So first things first, I think like we were talking about a couple months ago about like Google trying to catch up all these other big companies into the AI world. So we're talking about they're trying to catch OpenAI with ChatGPT or Claude because their models weren't there when we were talking about all of this world. But now they released Gemini 2.5 Pro and Gemini 2.5 Flash, which are like really capable models. Like feel like from a personal perspective, I just feel that they're like up to date and they can compete with the latest models of Claude or like OpenAI. And they added this thing, which is the way that on the Gemini 2.5 Pro, the model is capable of stop and do a kind of a reasoning process or like a multi-step process into in one simple task, which is incredible because like it's the back and forth that we as humans do that the model is going to be doing. So it gives a little bit of like a better output when we're talking about that. Then we got a Google Flow, which I want to get access to because it's the latest thing in creating video. It's incredible. Like I was doing a little comparison to Sora, which I used in the past. Sora is the model that creates video, like the video generation, AI video generation from OpenAI. And the Google Flow is way too far. As a matter of fact, I just did a little test, even like I sent the same video to our company chat, like where it was a kind of like a stand-up comedy where they were like, oh, we're prompts, and everyone was laughing. And I sent that video to my family and they were like, I told them like this was developed with AI, and they were like, no, that looks real. And it looks really real. Like it took me a second to catch up that it was AI. And I really got it just because on that specific video, it was like, oh, we're developed by prompts. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the next video was like, oh, it's a joke that someone created us with some text. And I'm like, oh, it's AI. But it took me a second because it's so real.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So Google Flow with the BEO3, which is the model that they have, is just incredible. And I think that this is something that we can talk about later, which is a little bit of the concerns that you can get because, like these are video generations is that thin line that divides that like real video versus AI generated video. So products placement and, like this whole thing because fake news, deep fakes and everything else it's just a thing that every day is getting more dangerous and more real. Yeah. What else do we have around? I think that Project Astra was one of the other things that I think is really incredible, which is like the capability to do research with your camera in some kind of a way. So it's an AI assistant that makes you able to search live in some kind of a way is they're them catching up to what you can do with the camera with OpenAI with
Right.
ChatGPT to your phone. But because they have the connections with Google Maps, they have their connections with all the Google database, it gives like a little bit of power, extra power from my perspective, of course. Like it's, like if you're in the street, it's just gonna take information from the database from Google Maps, and it's just gonna give you a little bit of extra information. Or it's gonna tell you like, oh, where do you want to go, and give you a map, which GPT can do. But like the connection among like the whole Google environment or workplace or apps is just really good. So yeah. And the last thing that I think is was really cool that they were talking about is agents. So
Mm.
we have been the last 2 or 3 months talking really really hard about agents and the way that is gonna everything is gonna move. So we're moving from chatbots to agents, and agents are capable of performing tasks. So we have Project Mariner and Jules that, for example, for Project Mariner is going to be an agent that can do multi-step tasks for you, like booking a restaurant or buying tickets for an event and things like that. So it's kind of like that assistant that it does more for you than just responding questions, which is amazing. Like we're getting into that point, which of course makes you think about like those entry level job positions that are going to be replaced in the future, because agents are going to be capable of doing the same thing but like 100 times faster, or like doing like two tasks at the same time in some kind of a way, which a human is not able to do. Like if I'm booking a restaurant, I cannot do it like twice at the same time. Like it's impossible. So this is still in development. So I just feel that that's kind of something that should encourage people to move a little bit further and think about like, okay, if those entry level job positions are going to be filled by AI, like what can I do as a human to like put myself over there and be like, hey, I won't be replaceable. I have a skill that is not replaceable from AI, from an AI perspective, right? But yeah, those are like the best things that we're looking around. I just feel that social media is packed now with like with AI generated videos that look super real, which it's incredible. I don't know what you think about those, but for me, it takes a second sometimes to
Yeah.
discover that they're AI.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and I'll just point out a couple things that sort of stood out to me as a couple of tools that they announced as well during the IO conference. In addition to the ones you mentioned, so there's Lyria 3. It brings AI generated music into YouTube Shorts. Workspace got a bunch of upgrades. So Gemini now writes, translates, schedules, and records videos with AI avatars to replace on-camera people, which is kind of weird to think about. Docs got source ground in writing. Gmail can now clean up your inbox with a single command. So, what's happening, I think, for a company like Google, it's to your point, one, is they're catching up. And the reason that they had to catch up is because if you think about a company like Google, it has a lot of products and services it's a very big, broad, wide company. So for them to kind of adapt to the AI revolution and sort of embed it into all of their tool stack is a lot harder than an open AI, which is sort of just an AI large language model sort of provider, foundational model provider from the ground up, and building tools on top of that, right? So, sort of what's happening is that, Google's not only catching up in terms of just the foundational technology, but now sort of baking it into its application layer. And really, now all of a sudden you have, if, like you're like us and you're a Google Workspace customer, now all this really strong, powerful technology is right inside your applications. And so, one of the conversations I've been having more and more of with a lot of clients in the tourism space is, hey, you've been using ChatGPT to date. Is that really the right tool for you long term if you're a Google company or not? Right. And, we're starting to test even ourselves, one, using Gemini more and creating gems, which is a similar to a custom GPT, right? We're really having open conversations around, is there a point at time at which we decide no longer to pay for ChatGPT and to move over and just do everything in Google, because that's already where we already have our trust and already have our documentation and already, you know what I mean? And so these are sort of the implications, I guess, of the latest releases from Google. Is this going to mean now that, people are starting to move from ChatGPT and OpenAI into more of a Google? And it's the same conversation we have with Microsoft companies, you know what I mean? Microsoft Copilot. And, the preference for most companies would be, can we just use the tools we already have natively with AI baked into them? Or do we need to keep building with, or do we need to keep using a ChatGPT or a Claude or whatever? And that's not a decision I think we're sort of trying to make for people. But it starts to really open up conversations in companies, or it should start to open up conversations in companies around their tool stack, right? Because we pay $350 a month US for ChatGPT access. Now we use it a lot. It's great. But these tools are now getting baked into our Google suite, and they're getting better and better, and it's all natively in Google. So I suspect we're going to come to a time one at our company where probably we're just going to make the leap over to Google and decide that's our tool. But I'm not sure yet. We're not quite there yet. But these are the implications, right?
Yeah, I feel that right now, like Google's power is inside their offering into their other tools. So let's say if you have Google Docs, you can use Gemini inside Google Docs. Or like lately, I've been using it to, like in the past, I used ChatGPT to help me write an email, but it was like a process of like, go ChatGPT, help me write an email with this topic, everything else iteration, get whatever I want, copy and paste. But now in Gmail with the Google Workspace, it's just like opening the Gemini thingy and being like, hey, Gemini, I'm going to text an email and blah, blah, blah. And it's just one button that says like apply, or I don't remember what the button says, but it literally creates the email for you with the subject, with everything, and you just have to send it. So, those are the little things that are giving an extra little bit of power to Google from my perspective. But I do think that to your point, like we maybe have to decide which one are we going to use, or it's going to become like streaming platforms are at any house where like people has Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and they pay like for like 5 or 6 different tools. So it's like we are in that point where I don't know how's the future looking for, because let's say as a real life example, like you pay TSN to watch like sports, but you pay Netflix to have some TV shows and things like that, and you have Amazon for other kind of TV shows, or like like every subscription comes with different perks. So depending on the kind of company you are, you would choose. So as an example, like with Claude, Claude is in the development space is one of the best ones, or at least that's what developers said. Like they are like, Claude is super good when coding, when we're talking about coding, when like solving issues and things like that. So like if you're a web development company, if you're in that space, I would suggest like, hey, try Claude. But like if you're a little bit around, or like you don't need that much power and you're a Google company, let's just go with Google with Gemini. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm pretty excited about like the future in this side. Feel that personally, like let's say we have an offering and we choose Google Workspace. I feel that my subscriptions are gonna keep us still like on like the side of like the other ones, because I use them for other things, or like my own GPT, or like my own cloud account. But we're going to keep talking about those big fishes in the market, because I do feel like the little web apps that use AI are going to start disappearing slowly. Because
Yeah.
if you think about it, and talking about Google is moving everything into their suite and everything else, and you were in the past able to connect GPT into your Google Sheets with a third party that you paid. But now it's more like, hey, Gemini is already there. So that third party, which was software as a service company, it's just like they either have to come out with something that Google is not capable to do, or they don't. You know. So I just feel that they're getting the whole market. So I don't know how's the future looking on that side, but like, yeah, it's just like streaming platforms. Like they're not little streaming platforms anymore. It's just like the big ones, and that's it, right?
And that's what's going to happen. You're going to have sort of the 3 or 4 or 5 big players that are going to become the dominant players. And I think for companies, they need to decide, corporately, which tools do we use, which tools do we allow, what are we paying for. So, things have become more complicated, but at the same time, what I'll say, one is actually, as much as things change, the more they stay the same. So when I teach, for example, AI intuition sprints, I'm really just teaching principles on how to work with AI. And actually, my preference is to be model agnostic or tool agnostic, because if you think about, all of the tools conceptually work the same way, right? So, they need to add context. You need to give it some instructions. You need to give it examples of what good looks like. And so a lot of what we teach actually at the Tourism AI Network is actually build systems that make you model agnostic, so that as the models change, it's not a big deal, really, right? They're all trying to become really sticky though, right? So for example, ChatGPT just increased its memory so that it knows more about you. So the more it knows about you, the more it speaks in your voice, and the harder it is to make that change. So, at the end of the day, they're all fighting for your loyalty and your dollars, and they're all trying to become the one tool for everything so that you don't have to go anywhere else, right? And so I think, to me, it's just, kind of keep calm and carry on is what I'd say. But start to have conversations in your team. And I'm having these conversations more and more with clients around, okay, I'm going to pick on one regional DMO that I'm working with right now, where they've decided we're going to have this many ChatGPT accounts. So not one for everybody, but we're a Google company. So we also want to encourage people to use Gemini. And so in my intuition sprints, I'm sort of teaching people how to create custom GPTs, and I'm teaching people how to create gems, because actually they're the same. Right. And so then what I'm actually teaching people is that what we actually have to do is we have to create a set of documents that are in none of these tools, that are your context documents, your prompts, your instructions. And so again, that way anybody can use any tool interchangeably for the different tasks they're doing. And so really, what we need to really focus on is not get too hung up in the models, and get more sort of focused on just concepts of how do we get the most out of these tools? What are the principles that we need to understand, no matter what the models are, right? And at the end of the day, too, I'll just say to people, it comes down to your level of trust and comfort, right? If you're a Google company already and you're just new to this space, honestly, like, the Google tools are really good now, and they're going to be able to get you there. So just dive into Google, right? If you're not feeling comfortable, if you don't have the budget to spend on extra accounts, you're already paying for it through Google, right? If you're more experimental and more kind of on the leading edge, you may want to, try a few tools and try them for the month and see which one you like better. And, to your point, there might be different tools for different use cases. I'll use myself as an example. I kind of prefer to use Google's deep research. I don't know why, but I just like it better. There's a couple features of Google's deep research that they've added that makes it even stickier for me. So again, I'm dyslexic. I've mentioned that before. So now with Google's deep research, I can create an audio overview, so an audio file of the deep research report, so I can listen to it and get it, and just listen to an audio version, which is really helpful, because that really works with the way I learn, right? So again, some of this is personal preference. Some of this is like, who do you trust? Which companies do you trust? I think the overall thing I would say, Juan, is that people need to really just have conversations in their organizations, develop policies, have AI as an ongoing conversation in their organizations, and to be having just a lot of discussions around these things, and not sweat too much about which tools, but not sleepwalk into this, and not just sort of, you need to have some rules around what tools and who's allowed to do what. And, and an understanding, a base level of understanding of, oh, gee, I'm a Google company, therefore I actually have access to like really advanced tools. And if I'm using a free ChatGPT account, that's very different than a paid ChatGPT account or the advanced tools I have in my, right? So really, AI literacy is what it comes down to. And I think we're just at a place where really there's no excuses anymore for companies and for individuals to not start to pay attention to this stuff, because things are moving fast.
For sure, for sure. I actually think that now that you mentioned our intuition experience is a really good it's a really good point, just because they they build the base, and with the base you're able to use any kind of
That's
tool.
right.
And then for me it's always been like that. It's just like trial and error, and just testing different models, and like getting my own kind of like perspective of every model. So for example, we have been in conversations where you say like, oh, I love to use 4.5, but for me the way that it worked, it was like, you know what, I'm not really vibing with this model, so it's kind of like trial and error. But what you need is the base. It's the base. Know what you're going to do, know what's everything. But yeah, like the nutrition sprints for us, I just feel that those build the base and the foundation for everything for the companies as well. and they should be talking about AI policies as well, just because it's moving really fast, as you said. Like Google catched up, and I think that it's maybe leading a little bit in like a couple months. Because a couple months ago they weren't there. Now I think that they're super powerful, so it's really good. But it everything that you're mentioning here just reminds me about a concept that is around the AI market right now, which is the AI divide, which is this conversation about it's kind of like on the AI ethics side, which is more like, hey, there's a gap between organizations that are going to be able to fully leverage AI and organizations that they're like basically they won't be able to. And as you said, we pay 350 US for to be able to use GPT, but like of course there are a lot of companies that are not going to be able to get there. So it's kind of like the back and forth, like they're saying that those companies are going to get ahead in the market, and there's going to be a socioeconomic disparity just because they have the resources to use AI. And it kind of makes sense, like when you use AI, you go faster, like, and things like that. But I feel that Google, if you pay Google Workspace, they just increase the subscription just a little bit, and most of the companies are like using Google, so they can use Google Gemini to keep on track. But I feel that it's a really interesting concept, the AI divide, in terms of like the whole market concentration, the benefits of that the companies that have AI are going to get, and technological advantages and things like that. I don't know. What's your vision on that side, mostly on like the concern in like those specific parts of the market that they're saying like, oh, those companies are going to get ahead because they have the money to even develop inside AI projects that are not with third parties, like not GPT, not Cloud, not nothing, just like they have a bunch of developers that build AI or large language models for internal purposes, which is puts them in like a really point ahead of other
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, sort of what you're talking about in your question about kind of my thoughts on this, is I absolutely see this happening. One is that there's sort of this starting to be this acceleration of AI forward companies that are sort of breaking off from the pack. So, we're no longer, and I'm going to just talk about the kind of technology adoption curve and in context in AI, because I wrote a blog about this. So I'm going to just sort of kind of talk a little bit about I did a research project just to understand kind of what is the adoption of AI in the marketplace and sort of the business environment in North America. And really to kind of sort of emphasize your point here is that, like, we're no longer, this isn't new technology anymore. We're sort of a couple years in. So, in 2025, according to the most latest statistics, North American business has now moved into the early majority phase of AI adoption. So just for context, tourism, the technology adoption curve is sort of a curve where it's like typically when a new technology is introduced, usually there's like the innovators, which is the first 2.5% of the population or of the users. Those are really the first movers who love to experiment, and they're really the people at the cutting edge. And those are the people that probably even before ChatGPT was out were playing with AI, sort of, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. And then we have the early adopters, which is typically 13.5% of users. That's the visionaries who move before the whole mainstream. Then we have the early majority, which is 34%. Those are pragmatic adopters who join once the results are proven. And then we have early majority. They're a little bit more conservative and budget sensitive. Those are 34% as well. And then we have the laggards, which is 16%, which is the skeptics and the latest adopters. And so according to the statistics, we're basically, in terms of generative AI use, we're basically at about 35 to 40% of companies say across several different studies that they're using generative AI tools. So we've moved into the early majority stage. And, so that's, that means that if you're not adopting this in your business, you're starting to fall behind. And what's even more telling, though, is that 92% of Fortune 500 companies say they're using AI, open AI products in some way. And 83% of executives in those companies plan to increase their investment over the next 3 years, citing strong ROI and competitive advantages. So I think that, to the point of what you're saying, is that, we're sort of at a tipping point, and you're kind of falling behind now if you're not really kind of adopting these technologies. Like, it's no longer just, oh, are these good technologies, should we adopt them? people are moving away from experiments to actually producing systems and processes that are increasing ROI and doing all those things, right? And honestly, Juan, this has nothing to do with if you're a big company or a small company. I think it has to do with your philosophy as an organization, your willingness to try new things. And I will say tourism is a lagging industry, typically when it comes to technology adoption. I see it all the time. I have conversations with people all the time that, yeah, we'd like to, this is really important. We'd like to, really kind of get on this, in 6 months from now, we're going to have time. Well, in 6 months from now, we're going to be talking about agents and all kinds of other things. And so, things are moving incredibly fast in this space. And so, yeah, I think I very much see the gap growing. And because if you're kind of in that early adopter innovator stage phase and you're sort of on the leading edge of what's going on here, you're just accessing tools so much faster and so much further and getting so much more done so much quicker that you're really starting to like break off from the pack, if you will. And I'm just going to make a couple more comments about sort of using AI tools, because that's a very broad statement. And I notice even I talk to people all the time who's using AI tools, and I do these training sessions and everybody's using AI tools. But when I start to drill down deeper into how you're using those AI tools, and did you know that there's reasoning models and deep research models? And did you know that you can customize AI tools to get more out of them? I would say that probably, at least in the clients I talk to, that's still probably in the early adopter stage of companies that are actually using tools effectively. And so, again, there's this huge growing gap. And I do think that there's going to be some impacts of that, in that there's going to be major winners and losers in the next few months and years, and major disruption. And people are going to be like standing there saying, what happened? What happened to our market? What happened? Why did these competitors come in out of nowhere and, you know what I mean, and wipe us out suddenly, or, take all this market share or whatever, right? So yeah, I think it's really time to pay attention and to really start to go all in on this. And, probably if you're listening to this podcast, you're already paying attention. So you're probably not the right audience even for us to be talking to. So this is where it gets even more difficult, right? Because the people that probably should be paying attention aren't even listening to this podcast. So, so it's very interesting. But I'm getting very concerned, honestly, about what's happening here. The other thing I'll say is we can't just sleepwalk into this thing. We can't just let it happen and hope for the best. We really need to be mindful and start having a lot of conversations internally.
For sure, for sure. And at the pace that this is moving is just sometimes it's kind of overwhelming because it's just moving really, really, really fast. So it's really hard to be on top of everything every single day, even though listening podcasts or reading every day about it, or like just getting newsletters about the market trends and everything else is just, it's just hard, and everything else. So, even for us that we're basically daily doing like reading about this and learning about this, it's hard to be on top of everything. If you let yourself, stay and you sleep over this, it's gonna be really, really, really hard, and you're not gonna be able to understand every single concept that is under this. Maybe if you do one of our intuition sprints, we can help you, like, with the big foundation. But like for sure, we're gonna come into a point where that foundation is gonna be like another foundation, you know what I mean? Like an extra step. So you have to do a little bit of research by yourself, because we're gonna move to the next year of people that is like just that they just adopted this. And one of the things for me is this concept is good. Like, yeah, there's going to be a gap, but as you said, it's not if you're a big or small company. It's not if you're able to afford or not these kind of tools. There are a lot of free tools over the market, like Gemini. You can use Gemini if you have a Gmail account. You don't have to own a Workspace account. Of course, you're not going to get the whole power of this, but like this is moving too fast. Just try the free tools. ChatGPT has free tools you can use for not for the whole day, but you can, still get a little bit of advantage of it, because right now we have companies that are 500 people that they're maybe not using AI, or maybe just adopting it, and they're getting the same outcome as the company that is two guys that have a startup, and they're building agents that do 80% of the work. Yeah. And it's like two men versus 500, and they're getting the same output, but the 500 one has been in the market for 10, 15 years, and this other one came to the market 2 or 3 months ago, and they're doing well, right? Yeah. So we're getting to that point. I'm really excited to see who's going to be the first one man AI million company. And that at the same time is just really scary, because like if it's going to become to a point where the AI is going to be able to create its own company, and that's like, I don't need the human. So
Totally.
that's kind of like where we're hitting at, which is kind of scary. But like us as humans, we have to control that because we're the ones developing the AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll say a couple things. One, in terms of, I've just noticed this even in an evolution when I do my intuition sprints and do training with customers and clients. In fact, I did this morning where it was an interesting conversation because the intuition sprint I did this morning, the company kind of has a lot of long-term employees. Everybody in the sales, I was doing it for a sales department, and they're like, "Oh, well, I said, tell me about your standard operating procedures for your sales processes and your this and that." And it was like, well, we have a bunch of documents, but they're old. I feel like everybody's been here for a long time, so everybody kind of does it their own way. And I said, that's great, but what about your new employees that are going to be coming into your workforce? They're called AI agents. If you don't write down all of that stuff and those processes and those steps, you're not going to be ready for the agent workforce that's coming. And we're all going to be managers of agents and humans. And so, interesting, like what's happening in the space is, big companies are now starting to say their HR and their IT are coming together into one department, which is crazy if you think about it, because actually we're going to be managing a team of agents as well. But in order for us to, so again, what I'm trying to get at with what I'm saying here is that, like, it's more than about understanding AI and understanding the tools. It's about actually preparing your information, your data, your processes, your documents, your file structure, your naming conventions. There's actually a lot of work that needs to happen in the next little while for every single company to prepare for what is coming, which is the agent conversation, which is kind of here, but it's still sort of not exactly, I don't think in my mind yet, where it's going to be, but very, very soon. Like, the agent space is developing very quickly. And to your point of, like, companies that sort of take the time and figure this out and prepare themselves for the agentic future will be ready. And they're, to your point, they're going to accelerate even faster than the companies that are sort of like, you know what I mean, not even playing around and experimenting with AI and understanding, sort of how they need to prepare for this future, right? So yeah, I see this gap really growing, and it's going to be very disruptive. And we're also starting to see, the data starting to show the impacts are starting to be on workforce as well. So what I will say, one, is I think that as much as AI has been a pretty front and center conversation, it hasn't actually yet hit the mainstream in the way I think it's going to over the next 12 months. Because I think now we're going to start to see, employment numbers is a kind of a lagging indicator, but we're starting to see, for example, youth unemployment with recent college grads is at is a very high level, and we don't know it yet. But I think that what we're going to discover is that companies are just deciding to deploy AI instead of hire recent grads, and that has huge implications as well, right? From an HR perspective, from a training perspective, from a societal perspective. So I think we're just at the cusp of, like, really, really big, substantial, meaty discussions on the AI side. And it's probably going to lead to regulation, which is the other thing we wanted to talk about, because governments are going to have to start stepping in and start regulating and legislating. And there needs to be a broader societal conversation about this. So I know, Juan, you also wanted to chat a little bit about some of the regulations coming out of the EU and sort of what that means for probably businesses in North America as well, thinking about, what that means for them.
Yeah, I mean, they created, let's call it like the first AI rule book, which is incredible because that shows where we at right now with the AI, to the point that they were like, okay, we need to regulate this because if not, it's just gonna get out of our hands and it's just gonna get crazy. They did on July 2024. They did like the first official journal in some kind of way, and then from August 1st, it became to a point where like this is the first day where we're gonna count. So if you're using AI, you need to adapt to these regulations. And this act is just divided in some kind of like four tiers, which is there are some things that are unacceptable, like you cannot use AI for those kind of things. And as now, they have to be banned already because from August 1st, they had 6 months to not like to avoid using AI, these kind of things. So we're talking about social credit scoring or untargeted facial scraping and things like that. Using AI for that it was just like unacceptable. Then we had a second tier, which is like the high risk use of AI. And we're talking about heavy paperwork, risk management, data governance, human oversight, and like C style marking. So we're talking about like if you're using AI in medical devices, if you're using AI for hiring software, if you're using AI for credit scoring, you need to adapt and like you be to the regulations, like use the regulations, do your paperwork, all of your things if you are going to use this kind of like any kind of AI inside of your thing. So credit score companies here, I'm not sure how they're using AI, but like there is regulated. Like if you're going to use AI, you have to show that the AI is capable enough and is accurate enough, because we know that AI sometimes like just goes all over the place, which is normal. Then we have the third tier, which is like a limited risk. So it's just like being transparent and telling users like you're talking to AI. So, like, hey, you're talking to AI, label deepfake videos or label Google BO3 generated videos. So we're talking about chatbots or like these protocols that recognize emotions over faces and things like that. And then the last level, which is the minimal or no risk. So you just have to follow laws like the existing law, not the AI law. It's just like spell checkers or AI in games and things like that. And I feel that is very good. Like AI in games is kind of like in between, just because this I mean that's the European Union, but like this case last year where a guy was talking to an AI inside of a game that was like mocking someone, and they were like in a relationship, so he fell in love and it ended up in like suicide, sadly. So
Mhm.
that's kind of a thing, that's one of the things like AI needs to be regulated, and I feel that that was like a an eye opener for some AI rules that over this side of the world haven't been developed, but like it's just a matter of time. They're gonna be, So yeah, basically it's a really big playbook. Oh, actually, the bans just started applying in February 2025, and then for August 2026, they're like just going live with the high risk of tier level obligations and things like that. So this is a process where they're working on. They created an AI office which is located in Brussels on 2024, like early 2024, and then they're kind of like the police of the AI models and things like that. So they started with the big ones, but like as this process continues, if you're an AI company or a company that is using AI in some kind of a way, if you're not adapting to this playbook, you're not going to be able to like
Right.
operate into the European Union, right? So that's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting that they created like, let's call it the AI police. It's really good as well, because if not, this is something that is growing really fast and it can go sideways really, really fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's useful also to just sort of pay attention to what's going on regulatory wise in different markets. And obviously, if you're operating in the EU, then you really need to be paying attention. Or if you're selling into the EU, know, we're at a point now. I think what we want to point out with this is not only is it just sort of AI developments and changing AI tools and technology, but now there's starting to be a regulatory framework out there. And what we're going to see over time is various regulations and legislation all over the world and different markets. And so now it's just an extra thing to be mindful of when we're operating in different markets, marketing to different markets, that kind of thing. Right. So yeah, definitely, I'm really thinking about that. We have a few clients that we do digital marketing to in the European Union, for example. So, we as an agency need to start thinking about what that means for our use of AI in terms of marketing and all those types of things, right? So it's just sort of it's becoming more complicated, unfortunately, and it's not getting easier.
Yeah, I mean, we have been adapting ourselves to different market regulations. So, for example, with the use of data, we have the Canadian regulation, and the states has a different regulations when we're talking about newsletters and data for like CRMs and everything else. And the European Union has different things. So now is that extra tier of like the AI. But one thing that I wanna like highlight for some companies, because they're not developing policies internally, is like, hey, the European Union is developing policies for this. So
Right.
you as a company, you should be developing policies for AI, because if the European Union is concerned about this, you as a company, you should be concerned about this too. Like,
100%.
me, if you're operating there and you don't have policies that adapt to this playbook, and someone messes up using AI, you're gonna get fines up to 7.5 million euros. So it's not a little fine. It's just like
Yeah.
they're not playing with this. So It's just a little bit of an advice for companies. It's just like, hey, start developing policies. And then to the point, like you mentioned about like data, like organization, like being clean with your data and things like that. The way that I like to see it is just like think about it as an intern that you, instead of explaining where's everything, you just like drop the intern into a room and it's like, we need you to do this by the end of the day without explaining. If you have everything organized, the person is going to be able to make it. But like if you drop your AI agent into a mess, you're not going to get the outcome.
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
same for humans, same for AI. Just like be organized and think about the policies and everything else. I just feel that those are the two things that I would say for companies right now. Is just like get into the loop. If you cannot use tools because it's so expensive, they're free tools. Like don't sleep over this. Like don't let yourself fall behind because it's moving really fast to the point. Like again, it's even fast for us that we're talking. We're learning about this every day. So don't fall behind. Organize your data so
Yeah.
you can jump into the agents conversations and you could just comply policies and then get policies internally because AI is just another thing that it's merging HR and IT, which
Yeah.
is something really interesting. So
Which is
those
crazy.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
my things.
So yeah, so no, awesome. Thanks, Juan. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to digest in this podcast. We'll probably pause it here because we're hitting up onto 45 minutes. But to Juan's point, you're behind if you're not if you're not actually fully engaged and sort of paying attention and using tools and developing policies. You're behind. So it's time to get caught up. If you need our help, certainly that's what we're here to do. It's not a sales pitch, but we have systems and processes that we developed to help you get caught up fast. Now, the good news about all of this is that you can sort of get caught up fast, and as long as you're nimble and you're sort of thoughtful, you don't have to be behind for too long. But you do need to catch up. So thanks, Juan. We will let's do this again. Maybe let's do this once a month and just sort of kind of keep people informed on how fast this world is changing and what they need to do to think about it.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. And yeah, like if you need to catch up, just get into our intuition sprints is gonna be the best, like the fastest way to catch up.
I think so. Yeah. Awesome.